First of all, thank you, Arthur.
Yeah.
Arthur King, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Or King Arthur, whichever you prefer, who runs the gallery and has just been a pleasure to work with. So thank you so much. So I will start the talk today. It's a little strange because I'm so glad there are some of you that I don't know. Because otherwise it's just a bunch of my friends and they already know everything, and it was a little bit embarrassing to think about talking to them, but I'll just do a sort of a brief introduction and discussion of the work. You guys can ask me questions and we can have a talk. So my work for most of my life has been sort of a connection between the personal, the political, the historical, thinking about the way I see the world, and I think I see the world through those three lenses very clear, well, not clearly at all, but that's how I look at things. And then I try to make sense of how those connect, how history and politics and the personal connect. And most of my work begins with photographs. I do a lot of traveling, and I take constant photographs, just really dumb, stupid little iPhone photographs, and bring them all back to my studio. I sort through them. I think about how they look together. Maybe this image looks good with this image. And then once I decide sort of, am I going to make paintings? Am I going to make prints? How's that going to work? I start again by drawing everything. So really, my work begins with drawing, I would say. Drawing is the way I can make sense of an image. It's the way I kind of claim the things out in the world to be my own so that I can work with them. And it's a way that I start my process. And my work is all about process. I think in some ways, I see an image, I apply a process to it, and then the content is revealed and discovered through that connection of process and image. So the drawings are charcoal on paper. They never take more than 15, 20 minutes, but they kind of settle me into thinking about what everything else will be. So when we look at the big wall behind you, these are mixed media paintings. And again, they come from dumb little collages of 2 or 3 images that I'm thinking about. And once I decide, oh, there's going to be a historical ship from Iceland, and it's going to somehow relate to this, which could be ice or it could be lava, I'm not exactly sure. And I'll throw in some stones, but then this stuff, what is that? Well, that's actually the names of objects that are sitting in a time capsule buried in the ground at the site of the New York World's Fair in 1964. So this is how history connects with me, because I've been here and looked at those stones. So once I decide I'm going to put these things together, I redraw everything onto the wood, and then I start painting on the wood. And so these are mixed media. There's the wood itself, which gets carved through. There's paint. The paint is casein pigments, which is a milk-based paint. There's asphalt, a water-based asphalt. There's gesso. And also in all of these pieces, there's what's called a polymer transfer. So what that is I take a photograph. Usually I blow up the photographs that I've been working from, or I blow up on a Xerox platen the drawings. And so I get just a cheap Xerox out of it, and then I coat the surface of that Xerox about 10 times with acrylic medium. And when it's dry and feels like it's the right thickness, I soak them. I use the bathtub because they're big. So I soak them in the bathtub, and then I peel the paper off the back. and what you get left with is a clear piece of flexible polymer that has the image in it. But it's translucent, so all the work I've already done will show through it, and then I can also paint on top of it. And I can carve through it, and I can add things to it. Like here, there's a leaf and some debris from my studio floor, just to get more textural, more sculptural in the work. So I try not to think about what these things mean until they mean something later. I'm sorry. So I try to kind of play dumb and not have, I don't want to direct these into a place of meaning. I just hope that at some point I get that feeling of, ooh! And if I get that feeling, then I'm like, okay, there's something there. And then I'll think about what it might mean. But most of the time I don't really want to know, and I don't really care. I just want it to have some kind of an emotional resonance, and I know that the images themselves are powerful enough and to hold the meaning. So I can answer any questions about any of this technically, or what these things are. If you're interested, you don't have to wait till the end of this thing. Yes?
Can I ask you about the one right there in front of you?
This one here?
I see the nice fine handwriting per se.
Right, yes. So this one is interesting. As I said, a lot of these pieces come from photographs that I've taken. This was herding sheep in Iceland. So the view of the sheep is from atop a horse.
Oh.
So that's where you're getting that sort of strange view. A bird at the beach. And this part is probably the weirdest part. This is from a show that I saw in New York at the New York Historical Society of the author Robert Caro, who wrote a lot of historical books on LBJ and the Power Broker. He's a very well-known historian in his 90s. And this show had wonderful photographs of him as a journalist, but it also had his manuscripts. And they're just written, these 900-page books that are written on a yellow pad. And when he'll cross through it, and then he'll take another piece of yellow paper and write something else and piece it on the top. And I thought, this is just the way I work. So I took photographs of that, and then put that in here, and I tried to make it look a little bit like a yellow pad. And I think later, after I finished it, I realized that it's really a piece about the creative process. I didn't think about that when I was making it. It's called Turn Every Page because that's his memoir, the title of his memoir. And so that's what that piece is about.
Very nice piece.
Thank you. So I'll just say in this section, which you can come into afterward, these are mostly prints, and my print practice is everything from mono print and monotype, which is a very simple process. You just paint on a plexiglass or a metal plate and run it through the press, and you get one piece, one time. You can run it through the press a number of times to build up layers, but in the end you get one piece and it can't be repeated. So you may ask, why would you do that? Why would you not just paint or draw? Well, because there's a magic that happens when it goes through the press, and nothing is like that. So you're doing it for the collaboration of the press, which changes everything. It's like doing raku ceramics. You think you know what you're gonna get, but you really have no idea. So there's very simple, the ones on the wall there are monotypes. They're just really simple pieces that are drawn and painted on plexi and run through the press. There are also pieces using the solar plate technique, and there are some plates that are in the cases there. Solar plate is a steel plate that is faced with a photosensitive emulsion. And so when the light hits that plate, it hardens it. And where the light does not hit the plate, when you wash it in water, it sloughs off. And it makes a multi-level plate that you can print out of. So there's that. There's also linoleum cuts, which there's a piece of linoleum there. One of the pieces here is made that way, and that's called a relief print. You have a piece of linoleum or a piece of wood, and you carve away the areas that you do not want to print. And then you roll ink on it, print it, and there you go. So there are combinations of all of those things. There's also some screen prints, which I'd never done before, but I won this residency through the California Society of Printmakers to work with a printmaker named Thomas Wojak up in Vallejo a few years ago. And he helped me to make those big pieces. There's about 15 of them in the series. There's 2 there. And that leads me to this room, which is really the title room of the show. The show's called After Charlottesville. And the reason it's called After Charlottesville is that in 2017, I'm dating myself so horribly. In 2017, I went to the area of Charlottesville, Virginia, and it was right after the riots, where we heard the term, there are good people on both sides, where Heather Heyer was killed by white supremacists. It was the sort of the apex of the beginning of the Trump years. And I went there for an artist residency, and I did a lot of research about Virginia because I hadn't spent much time there. And I knew it was horse country, and I knew it was slave country. And I visited Jefferson's home in Monticello and the slave quarters, and I researched handbills about the sale of human beings and equines on the same auction block. And I got really involved in the Virginia landscape. There were a number of cemeteries that I visited of enslaved peoples. And I kept thinking about the Virginia landscape and the plantations and how that landscape, what that landscape had witnessed. And I also went to Charlottesville, and I went to see the statue of Robert E. Lee and his horse that was sort of the flashpoint of that riot. And when I got there, it was shrouded in black plastic. It was huge, shrouded in black plastic. And I came back and did those pieces of the Robert E. Lee statue. So the series shows 15 different views of it, from basically a drawing of the statue all the way to the last one, which is the piece shrouded in plastic. Recently, and I did that big piece on the wall there also as a response to my time in Virginia. And I recently went back to the VCCA, Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and in this past January, and I did the pieces here on the wall, which are landscapes that are actually portraying the Virginia landscape that's being destroyed by an invasive vine. So I didn't know that that was happening at the time. They just looked cool to me. But again, the content gets revealed through the process. And then I realized, oh, what is this vine? I'd kind of like to know, because this wasn't here when I was here 5-6 years ago. So I bookended the show, starting in Virginia in 2017, ending in Virginia in 2024, which also encompasses the Trump years and the COVID years. So there's a lot that we've all lived through in this time. And this is kind of my way that I dealt with it, my way of dealing with it. So that's kind of the talk, but I'd love to answer some questions.
Robynn, for some of the students here,
you talk about the residencies, and I know how important they've been to you in terms of way to see different places and to travel and have different experiences. Talk a little bit about how that's influenced your work.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Come on in. Oh my God, I haven't seen you in 1,000 years. So residencies are places where artists can go. Sometimes you pay, sometimes they pay you, sometimes it's a wash. But they're there to give artists time and space to work. And they offer different things. Some offer just the studio and you have to find your own place to live. Others offer a great place to live. Sometimes you have obligations of teaching. Most of the time you don't. Most of the time it's really there for time and space. And so I started doing residencies in 1990. And I've done at least one a year probably since then. And those residencies have taken me to Iceland and Virginia and Sonoma, where I did those pieces.
Belgium.
And Belgium and France.
Cuba.
And Cuba. And, you know, kind of all over the place. And so because my work is really, as we spoke about in the beginning, it's just sort of a telescope into my own way of looking at things. These residencies themselves become part of what I'm talking about in the work. And I tend to go to places where I'm interested in either the history or the landscape or something about that region, that area that I go to. And then I take photographs there, and then I use those photographs later in other pieces, and the cycle kind of continues. So, yeah.
Travel then seems to be very important.
Travel is important as one of my travel buddies. The piece there with the camels, that was our trip to Morocco last spring. But I think that that travel is a time when I get out of myself, and I'm much more influenced by what I'm bringing in, what I'm seeing, than just me. So it's like a way of bringing new influences into my experience, and then they mix with everything that's in here and are sort of regurgitated. And in this show, this includes work from COVID, and we couldn't travel, right? Nobody could go anywhere. So we all had all these trips planned, all this stuff going on, residencies here and there, everything came to a halt. And after I finished up the pieces I was working on at the time, which was I think this one and a couple of others, I started incorporating things not just from past trips, but from my life. So, for example, there would be no way of knowing this, but this is an old school bus that is on the trail where I ride my horse. And it's been completely taken over by vines. And so this was a piece during COVID time where I could take an image from Iceland, an image from essentially my backyard where I ride, and this alligator, which is, sometimes you don't even see it, was because during COVID time, I did have to go to Florida because my elderly father was there. And so this is like a Florida reference. So, and then there's some pieces in here. The piece that's called August is from a series that I did in August of 2020, which was in response to the Portland protests. And I had been working on those pieces, the Portland protests next to the fires from the previous year that had devastated Australia. So there's a kookaburra in there. And as I was working on those, we had our own fire in Santa Cruz. We had the CZU fire where friends were evacuated and the sky was orange. You know, all of us experienced those fires. So it was, and so then some of the images from those burns ended up like in this piece, which is called Burned North Coast and My Heart. So everything kind of moves, I try to start expansively, traveling, seeing things, bringing it back to myself, and then putting it out there again for others to hopefully relate to, but at least I relate to it. So I figure if it takes my time and I'm interested enough to be that engaged over months and months making these things, hopefully you'll all get something out of it. So there'll be something for you to grab onto. So anything else? Any other questions, comments? I want to thank you all for being here. It's also sort of amazing. I have a bunch of friends here. It's really moving that all of you came, and it's really wonderful to see new faces and hopefully having the work in an educational setting. I taught at a community college for 30 years. So I'm all about community college, and a lot of my friends are. Really appreciate what community college does for the community and for the students. And to have this beautiful gallery here is wonderful, and to meet faculty and meet the students is just, it's very nurturing and nourishing. So thank you.